today. So super. And a warm welcome actually to all those folks that are just sort of dialing in. We're going to be getting started in about a minute's time. But thank you for joining, and we're really looking forward to this conversation with you today. Super. So the few ways in which you can engage with us today. So one is via the chat function. So if you want to talk to us there, you're more than welcome. And certainly I will be, and some of the panelists as well will be sharing their thoughts and talking to you there too. And similarly, there's also a Q&A function as well, and that does have a feature where you can actually ask questions to us directly, and also anonymously as well if you prefer. So please do share any questions you've got there as well. We'll give it another sort of 30 seconds. I think there's a few more people that might be joining. So we've had around 100 people today that have registered for the session, which is super exciting. Super. Let's sort of get sort of things started. So a warm welcome, everybody, and we're really delighted actually to be collaborating with the Terrence Higgins Trust to bring you this conversation live today. And absolutely thrilled to have two guests on the line with us as well, Abby and Sue, that are going to be sharing their stories and also some information about the Terrence Higgins Trust as well. So for those of you who don't know me, I know we've got some new people dialing in today. My name is Matt Cameron, and I'm the founder actually and the global MD of LGBT Great. And we are a community organisation platform for the financial services industry. And we work broadly across lots of different parts of the world and lots of different parts of financial services as well. And one of the key focus areas for us this year has been around community building, increasing awareness around important LGBT issues, but also those issues that affect or have affected the LGBT plus community as well. One of our key strategies here at LGBT Great is to ensure that we can mark those important dates throughout the calendar year that serve as a reminder of the battles, one, which have been sort of fought and faced, and also two, the areas of work that there's still a lot more to do on. And of course, the HIV and the AIDS pandemic at the time caused huge damage to lots of different communities and still continues to affect many people around the world. Now, of course, things have progressed significantly when it comes to care and treatment for people with HIV and AIDS, but there continues to be a huge stigma around HIV and AIDS as well. And we're going to be exploring some of those issues today and some stories as well. With the folks from the Terrence Higgins Trust. So this marks the sort of a second point of collaboration really with this wonderful charity. We collaborated last week for our end of year reception here in London. It was great to see so many folks turn up to that event, and also more importantly donate, because donations can make a real difference to the sort of Terrence Higgins Trust and the work that they do to support people in need. So we're going to be doing a sort of a gentle plug today to get you to donate, however big or however small, to this amazing sort of charity organisation. But we would like to start off with a welcome from Richard Angel from the Terrence Higgins Trust. And we're going to play this sort of video now that's going to talk a little bit about the AIDS and HIV epidemic, and also a bit of the work of the Trust as well. So let's play that video and we'll look forward to seeing what you think shortly.
My name is Richard Angel, the Campaigns Director at the Terrence Higgins Trust. Thank you for joining us this World AIDS Day. It's brilliant to be working with LGBT Great as a network of LGBT people in financial services, as people who champion good practice, advice and better guidance for people on being not only inclusive at work for the LGBT community, but impactful in society for the LGBT community. We appreciate you working with Terrence Higgins Trust today. This World AIDS Day is a time not only to remember those that we miss and we have lost, but focus on what we can do to end the epidemic today. And hopefully today's talk will take you back to the beginning, where it all started, and see us through a 40-year epidemic, but a time of change and a time now from fear to hope. Enjoy. When this epidemic started, it was experienced by a tiny number of people. And it was scary in a way that I think we can't calculate now. It was an unknown to everyone involved. We take our name from a man called Terry Higgins. In 1982, he was working by day as a typist and computer programmer, and by night as a DJ in Heaven nightclub. One of those evenings he was working, he collapsed and got moved to St Thomas's Hospital. They did not know what was wrong with him, and after some days of tests, he released himself. and went back to a shift a few days later at Heaven nightclub, where he collapsed again and got transferred back into the hospital. His partner at the time was asking whether it might be this unknown illness coming over from America, and they weren't able to talk back to him about what they thought Terry was going through, because they didn't recognize the queer love between them at the time. Their relationship just wasn't recognized. Terry sadly went on to die with Rupert, his partner, watching, and it was traumatic for many. He didn't get his Rupert, his partner, didn't get it confirmed what Terry had died for until he had to read it in a medical journal, because they wouldn't share with him what he had experienced, because he wasn't quote unquote family. So at that time, there wasn't even a test for the HIV virus. In fact, we haven't even named the virus that was causing what was then known as GRIDS or AIDS at the time, gay-related immune deficiency, or what we now know as acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Terms that both of which have gone out of date, really, and we don't use anymore. But it was a real time of fear. And the injustice that was felt, not only by Rupert, his partner, but his friend Martin and others, led them to turn their anger into action. And they founded our organisation as the first HIV response organisation anywhere in Europe. And we are proud of them for doing it, and so thankful that they did. Their key insight was that nobody should have to go through what Terry went through, experiencing the virus, or what they went through with an untimely death of a friend and loved one. And they were determined to take action. And they wanted to plaster his name over our organisation, not to make it about Terry, but to make sure all the conversation going forward about HIV and this virus and how it impacted people was about humans and their lives, that we remembered there was real people experiencing life-changing and sometimes life-ending conditions because of this virus. And we continue to proudly work in his name since. And that insight has served us well over that time. Since the time of Terry, the epidemic has changed in many ways. Care developed quite quickly, so people could be looked after in those late stages going forward. We then saw tests that become not only effective, but reliable for people that they could trust in going forward. And in 1996, treatment became available that was effective, a triple treatment that worked to control the virus and reduce its impact on your system. That treatment has evolved and developed still, and there are a myriad of treatments for people living with HIV that all do the same thing. And fundamentally what they mean is if you are taking your medicine, you get two great benefits. Firstly, the virus is no longer attacking your immune system. So you can live long, healthy lives going forward, and you have to worry about how the virus might be impacting your health or well-being. Secondly, people on effective treatment cannot pass on the HIV virus. No ifs, no buts. They did a study with 2 million acts of condomless sex and not one HIV transmission from those on effective treatment. It is a remarkable step forward. The science is clear. So if you only take one thing away from this World AIDS Day talk, it's that people on effective treatment can't pass on the virus. It's important that you know that you share that, and that you pass on that message that people living with HIV can't pass it on. Because at the core of all HIV stigma is the idea that somebody is quote unquote infectious. And that is just not true now. And it's important that we work together to fight that, that stigma and ensure that those living with HIV can live well going forward. Ending new cases by 2030 is not a pipe dream. It is a working progress. It is possible, currently not probable, but with your support, the Terrence Higgins Trust, with our partners at NAT, Elton John AIDS Foundation and many others, will do all the work necessary to bring the funding from government, the support from the NHS, action from our clinicians, the work in the community to ensure that we end new cases of HIV, have nobody dying of a HIV-related illness, and that we fight the stigma day in, day out. Thank you for your support this World AIDS Day. We couldn't do it without you. La.
Great. What brilliant sort of opening remarks from Richard. And I think there's some number of key points there that I know our panelists, Abby and Sue, are going to want to pick up on today. Abby, hand over to you to introduce yourself and Sue and take us through the key points about your wonderful charity organisation. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Yes, so you just heard from our campaigns director, Richard. My name's Abby, and I have the great privilege of working with Terrence Higgins Trust in their corporate partnerships team. So I'm helping spread the message about the work we're doing, which you've just heard from Richard, and which you're about to hear even more from the wonderful Sue. And I get the great pleasure of working with partners like LGBT Great and other organisations to help share our message and to help them become places that are supportive of their colleagues achieving good sexual health, and to raise those vital funds that allow us to continue the work we're doing. So thank you very much for joining us today to hear a little bit more about that. And today we're asking you to show up for people living with HIV, be that as an individual or as part of your organisation and your networks, be that through a donation or by simply leaving with that message that Richard left us with just then, is that people living with HIV on effective treatment can't pass it on. So do tell your friends, tell your family, your colleagues, and help us end that stigma. So I'm now going to pass over to Sue Hunter, one of our fantastic Positive Voices speakers, and I am going to share some slides, so bear with me 1 second while I just make sure I'm doing that properly. Just give me 1 second. There we go. So hopefully you can all see that now.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, is that playing for you, or is it just the...
That's better, great.
Perfect. Over to you, Sue.
Okay, thank you very much. I know it isn't the 1st of December, but you know, we cannot get to everybody on the 1st of December. So we're still commemorating, still celebrating World AIDS Day, probably until the mid-December. It is on the 1st of December every day. It's a time where we stand in solidarity for those who we've lost and loved, and also to stand in solidarity with people living with HIV, to where that red ribbon symbolises so much. You know something about HIV, you're standing with la forza, as it says in Italian, in strength and as in unity. Next slide, Abby, please. And the World AIDS Day message this year is equalise, to address the inequalities holding back progress in ending AIDS across the world. And you know, we have a momentous theme every single year, and this year it's equalise. Thank you, Abby. 37.7 million people are living with HIV across the world. And if you were to believe me, if I was to say to you that 52% of people living with HIV in the world are women. So basically, there are more women living with HIV in the world than men. If we look at the UK stats, just over 106,000 people living in the UK with HIV, with a third of that amount of people living with HIV are women. Just over 5,000 people are known to be living with HIV, but they're unaware. So we need to get them into tests, get them on treatment so they're not passing the HIV virus on. This comes from Viable Medical Statistics. London is still seen the highest prevalent city in the UK of people living with HIV, just over 36,000 people. Thanks, Abby. So HIV and AIDS. What's the difference? Well, there is a difference, and they're two separate things. The H in HIV gives it away. It means, it stands for human. So basically, if you're a human being, you can acquire the HIV virus in specific circumstances. What it wants to do is to get inside of the immune system, attack it, destroy it, job done. Now, what can happen if HIV goes undiagnosed and untreated? You could come to a situation where we call in Europe late stage HIV, and it stands for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And to be quite honest, this should not be still happening. We have too much information about HIV in education. So, you know, when you basically, anyone we say, and we do a lot of work in schools and colleges, we say that anyone that is sexually active, or perhaps you may have just started a new relationship after a long time, get yourself tested, know your status, don't leave it where you come to a situation where you're showing visible signs where your immune system has been attacked, and that could be life-threatening for you. Thank you, Abby. And if you understand the way HIV is transmitted, you could get to understand so much. So basically, HIV needs to be present in sufficient amount of fluids, and these are the only fluids. Sufficient amount of that virus is going to be there for potential transmission: blood, semen, vaginal fluids, breast milk, anal mucus. The virus has to get from the bodily fluids of the person living with HIV into the bloodstream of the person that's not living with HIV. And that tells us one important message: you cannot, it's been proven, you cannot acquire the HIV virus from someone kissing you, cuddling you, sharing the same cup and saucer as you, standing in the same room as you. Now, if we go back 4 decades, that's exactly what people thought, and that's where when we didn't have the information, we got 4 decades of information about HIV. Thank you, Abby. So we got 4 key prevention tools: testing, test regular for HIV, know your status throughout your adult sexual life, as one would say. If it was that you became positive, you tested positive, you've gone to HIV treatment. Richard described that treatment amazingly. It will keep you well, it'll keep you having a long life of healthy life expectancy, and you will not be able, documented fact, you will not be able to pass the virus on to any other sexual partner. Condoms, again, if used correctly, right size, right fit, right lubrication, will stop you from acquiring the virus from a partner you don't know their sexual status. And we've got another game changer in the corner that is helping us, and we're hoping it will help us end HIV transmission by 2030. PrEP. Quite basically, PrEP is a HIV medication that a man or a woman can take to keep them from acquiring HIV from a sexual partner they don't know their status. So basically, it's people that are not living with HIV to keep them not living with HIV, and that's in the most basic terms. Thank you, Abby. And testing has come on so far in the last few years. We've got, the test kits that you can order online and it can be sent to you. Hopefully there won't be a postal strike. We just have to prepare ourselves for everything. But you can, if that does come in on time, you can do that in the comfort and the privacy of your own home. You get all the information with it, fantastic resource. There's the new swab test. You can have you can get tested at your GP, you can get tested at your sexual health centre. We're now going to be rolling out testing in community pharmacies, which is going to be absolutely amazing. Thank you, Abby. So again, just to reiterate what Richard has said in the beginning opening, if someone now is living with HIV in the UK, they will go on to medication straight away. Within a matter of weeks, that virus is going to be suppressed, contained, and called what we call undetectable. That means you will not, cannot be proven pass that virus on to any other sexual partner. And the main thing with the medication, it will give you a long, healthy life expectancy of anybody else your age. Next slide, please. So just a bit more information about PrEP and PEP. Again, a medication taken by people that are not living with HIV. You can be taken on a daily basis. We fought for many years to get this on the NHS. Can I just say, one of the many things we campaigned for, we campaigned for this to be free on the NHS, and we did win after a couple of years. And again, they can eliminate HIV from unprotected sex. But can I just also say, as much as this is a game changer for stopping HIV transmission, it doesn't stop other STIs. So be very mindful of all those other lovelies one can get from having unprotected sex. And again, this is something we're going to be rolling out into community pharmacies in the very near future as well. So you might be able to pick up your PrEP from like a Superdrug or a Boots. Just watch this space. PrEP has been around for a long time. It used to be sort of given to finger stick injuries in hospitals. It's a medication you can take if you've had a risk of HIV, taken within 72 hours, ideally 24. That will stop the possible risk of the transmission. Again, you can go on our website and get more information about PrEP and PEP. Thank you, Abby. Again, the H is in the human. They're all human beings in front of you, all smiling back at us, meaning within any right circumstances, any human being can acquire the HIV virus. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next part of this session, we put this on, it doesn't matter whether we speak to a corporate business, whether it's a school or a college, we have to be very mindful of people's thoughts and feelings of the next part of the session that we do, because we talk about real life incidents, real life things that can trigger and upset people. So we have to put this can be distributed via your line managers if you think you need to talk to someone afterwards or you need some support afterwards and it's been a trigger for you. Thank you, Abby. I think that's it, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. And then it's, would you like me to continue, Matt? Yes? Great.
Absolutely.
Okay, so World AIDS Day, people ask me all the time, so what does World AIDS Day mean to you? Well, actually quite a lot, and I want to share something with you today. It was 17 years ago where I was given my diagnosis of HIV, where it was an absolute shock, not just for me, but for my family and my loved ones. You see, I came from a background where certain things only happened to certain people, and that was the education I got brought up in, and that's a sort of the community setting I was nurtured and brought up in. So when I received my diagnosis, not only was I shocked, my whole community and the whole of my family was shocked. And I just want to take you back when I received that diagnosis to give you an understanding of where it started and where I am now, living my best life, living with HIV. I just come out of a relationship of a year. We'd had a super relationship. I'd met him just after my divorce, and we met in very similar circumstances. He just come out of a divorce. So we sort of connected, and we, you know, very, very quickly. We had a lovely relationship for a year, and I decided to end things because of things that were still going on in my own personal life. We kept friends, and we had the occasional phone call. I heard he'd been unwell. I'd heard he'd been ill. I'd heard he'd been in hospital, but I wasn't quite sure why and how and when. Anyway, I remember one day, one afternoon, actually, I received this knock at my front door, and I opened the door and he's standing there. Now, he's always been, I always remembered him being a very tall, handsome man, and with a smile that would sort of break anything. It was such a beautiful smile, and he was standing there, and he was still tall, he was still beautiful, but he looked very ill. He was very pale, he'd lost weight, and I was literally quite shocked when I seen him. We embraced at the door, and he came in, and I was really still quite pleased to see him. And I remember we were drinking tea on the sofa, and he literally tells me, he said, "Sue, I really want to let you know I have been ill. I've just gotten over pneumonia. I've just come out of hospital, and I have been diagnosed with HIV." As soon as he mentioned those 3 letters, you can imagine the millions of things that were going through my head. Now, again, I was a girl of the 80s. I remember the one and only government health campaign, "Don't Die of Ignorance." I remember those tombstones. I remember the flowers, the darkness of this particular advert. And I remember the leaflet campaign that came through the letterbox. And I remember on the particular day that they launched this leaflet that came through everybody's letterbox in the UK, I remember my mother running to the letterbox, pulling it out, waving it like a flag, saying, "That's not going to happen in this house," and popped it in the waste paper bin. I always remember that. Little did she know, little did I know that 35 years later, I would be diagnosed with that same virus. So my mind went back to that situation. My mind went back to, but I'm straight, I'm white, I'm a woman, all those millions of things. Anyway, I can let him speak. And he said, "I really want you to go for a test. So promise me you will go for a test." And I remember saying to him, "I'm all right, nothing wrong with me." And the thing was, I was all right, and there wasn't nothing wrong with me. I've never been ill in the last 17 years living with HIV. I had no specific signs or symptoms That's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, he gets up to go. He goes at the front door and he turns back to me and he said, you will go for a test. He went, you promised me you will go for a test. I went, yeah, of course I will. Of course I will. I never saw him again. I never spoke to him again. He ended up back in hospital with pneumonia. He couldn't shrug it off this time. He was too ill to take the medication they had back then. And he died 2 weeks later. He was 43 years of age. He left a 15-year-old daughter. And I thank him every single day for his bravery, his honesty, his love, and for knocking on my door that day. Because I'm telling you now, I would never have gone voluntary for a HIV test because I thought I wasn't in, whatever that is, a risk group. And I thank him every day for that. And his name was Christopher. And he deserves his name, and I celebrate him and commemorate him with a hand on my heart every single year. In fact, nearly every single day, because I am here because of him. The work, a lot of the work I do is in his name, in his memory. So obviously I goes and gets my HIV test. I get my diagnosis. I remember sitting in the waiting room with my friend I'd known for 53 years. My friend Suzanne would be in primary school together. We literally grown up together. And I remember her saying to me in the waiting room, because I was getting quite anxious and nervous going in for that result. She said, you know you're going to be okay soon, because HIV doesn't happen to women. That's what she said to me. And I think the thing was, Suzanne has never been wrong. I thought, right, okay, yeah. Anyway, we goes and they're just about gets our bottoms on the seats, and he came straight out with the news of my diagnosis of HIV. And you know what? We both learned an incredibly important lesson that day. All the misconceptions at that moment that we both had flew out the open window. What we thought about HIV was wrong. We learned a very valuable lesson. I went on to medication straight away, even back then, with a matter of months and weeks and months. I became, well, I mean, I've never been unwell, but my outlook started to change. I received some counselling for the first year of my diagnosis. I couldn't understand. It was mental for me because I couldn't get my head around how have I acquired this virus? You know, do I blame my education at school? Do I blame this? Do I blame that? And at the end of the day, I said, come on, you can do something now about it. And I thought, I'm going to do something about it now, because I cannot be the only person thinking, I know everything and I know this and I know that. So I decided to do something about it. So after a year of diagnosis, I contacted this amazing charity I never knew existed, the Terrence Higgins Trust. And it's by them I got this amazing year of cancer, and that literally put me up front of clearing my head and all sorts of things. And I came across this amazing project within the charity. And I was the only woman on the charity, on the project back in the day. And I thought that needs to be changed. And we started to get started a very grassroots project, Positive Voices, and we started to get some outside funding. And the years went on, we got some other people from different communities on this project. And I started to meet the most amazing human beings I still have the pleasure of having in my life, from communities I would never have dreamt I would have been connected with. So I suppose at this point, my life has been enriched by people I know that now than what I never imagined I would have in my life. It is a national project, and it's thanks to LGBT great and companies, amazing companies like yourself that have helped and support us, that make us go out into a school setting and talk to young people to say, HIV is a virus. We shouldn't have stigma against it. And this is the core of the work that Positive Voices does in education. So we have a future-free, stigma And you know, so it's the education has got to start somewhere, and that is basically my passion. And why it's so much my passion is when I was diagnosed with HIV, my daughter at the time was only 8, and I felt so disgusted, so shameful towards myself. I was too scared to tell her. Maybe it was because I was frightened my ex-husband may come along and take her away, seeing I was an unfit mother. So I kept quiet. I kept silent for 6 years. Those sleepless nights, those not wanting to weep because I was hiding something crucial from my flesh and blood. She arrived at 14 and I decided I wanted to have that conversation. And I remember sitting on her bed and starting the discussion about HIV, saying that my mum is living with a virus. It's called HIV. I remember taking my pills into her bedroom and I showed her my pills. It was, yeah, mum takes 1 pill a day. And I'm going to be, at the time she had her iPhone, you know what kids are like, always the iPhone's always there, isn't it? The phone, just in case they miss a call. It's got to be there at the dinner table. Oh, I'm expecting a call, aren't I? I went, really? Anyway, and I always remember I heard a thud after I'd said what I'd said. And I remember bending down and picking her iPhone off the wooden floor. And then I remember coming up and her head had literally sunk into her lap at that point. And then her head looked up at me and she had all these tears coming down her face. And she said to me, "You're going to die, Mommy, aren't you? You're going to leave me now, aren't you?" I said, "No way. I'm not going nowhere. I've been promised a long life, healthy life expectancy. You're not going to get rid of me that quick," I said. We had a bit of a laugh. We had a bit of a cry. We had a bit of a cuddle. And she said to me, "Can I tell my best friend, Mum? Is it okay to tell people?" "You can tell anyone you want," I said. She didn't. She couldn't. A young person at that age going through a very crucial part of her education, exams, choosing colleges, looking forward to that next step in her education. It was crucial to have her friends, her peers around her. She didn't want to rock the boat. She didn't want to be seen as being different at school. She didn't want to lose her friends. She didn't want to have the dirty looks and all of that. So she kept quiet as well. She was silent for nearly 2 years. And there was an absolute consequence to her because of why she wouldn't speak out. She started to become disruptive at school. We had to manage her through that last piece of her vital schooling. And it was a challenge as a family to keep her on board. And, you know, she did leave at 16 with a couple of banging results, a couple of A stars she received. So I must have done something okay. But, you know, she has stood in the face of adversity on many occasions as a young person, living in a family where HIV has been affected. And I was more scared when she went skiing in February. She's definitely going to break an ankle or break something. You know, there again, there's another misconception about skiing. Never done it. So anyway, she came back in one piece, but I was more worried, you know, about, but that's, you know, we're always worried about our kids and our loved ones, won't we? Those are the most important things, right? Not living with a virus. But, you know, one thing she used to say to me throughout her growing up, she said, "Mum, do you think you'll ever be around?" She said, "Do you think you'll ever be around if you ever have kids? Do you think you'll ever be a grandmother?" And I secretly used to say to myself, "I hope I am, but I don't know if I will," sort of thing, because we're talking about years ahead, you know. And what is so wonderful to celebrate again this year of good news is my daughter's now expecting, and I will becoming a grandmother. And if all goes to plan, baby will be arriving on my birthday. But and that really does put things into perspective of life, right? And life goes on, and that's what you know, this is what we should be thinking of. Not, oh, someone living with the virus, oh, you know, I'm not going to be bothered to get any information because it doesn't affect me. But again, we're here to say HIV can affect any one of us. And I love talking within communities that are not my communities, because I think it's so important that we share, you know, what we're all feeling about HIV and the messages that HIV can happen to anyone. And we just need to inform ourselves. We need to carry on the conversation. So I'm going to stop now. I'm just hoping I haven't gone over my time.
Not at all. And, you know, wow, thank you so much for sharing that story and your experience. I've got to say, I welled up a few times when you were talking there, and I was trying to sort of keep composed. I mean, that's an incredible story, and you are an incredible human being and an incredible storyteller. So thank you for sharing, you know, your experience with us, Sue, today. And I know from people listening in as well, equally overwhelmed actually, and inspired by that story as well. Now we have got quite a few questions that have come through, so if you don't mind, let's see what you think on some of these questions. But one of the first things that has kind of come through here, so is a question around how you sort of came to overcome the isolation and the stigma associated with your HIV diagnosis, and how you work through that.
Well, first of all, stigma is such a massive thing. You know, how do you ever come to terms with someone turning around and saying to you that they don't want a relationship with you because they fear their life too much? I mean, you get over it and you continue, but you know, I mean, we're talking about in-depth stigma takes a long time, and you know, how do we move on from that? Well, first of all, for me personally, I turned it around. You know, I had the strength, and I turned it around and pushed it into something positive, like talking about my story, talking about, you know what, a white heterosexual woman can acquire HIV. So that message in itself, me just standing, that message in itself can say so much. But not everyone can do that. Not everyone can do that. But I mean, we all got different ways on how we break down stigma. I try and do every single day on every opportunity. You know, if I see something not, like, you know, the HIV and AIDS, I don't live with AIDS, I live with HIV. That in itself, that terminology is really an important thing. That in itself is breaking down stigma. I'm not the AIDS lady like I used to be called going into schools, only because they didn't know. They soon turned that round, that, oh, the lady living with HIV, that's fine. But even that in itself, the smallest things, Matt, would make a difference.
Yeah. So it's this idea around, you know, being visible around a story, storytelling, of course, awareness building, this sort of thing, right? It helps to break down those stigmas. And I think the point you make around what words mean and what the impact of language around talking about this as well, I think is also, you know, critically important. And there's another question that's come through here around, do you think that everyone should inform their partner about their HIV status, even if they are undetectable? And then the second part to that question, especially those choosing to keep it a secret, scared of negative discrimination and stigmas associated.
Okay, well, first of all, my advice, and I've mentored a lot of people, Matt, over the years, women and men. How do I disclose? When do I disclose? How can I? And the first thing I always say is, you are always in charge. Don't be, oh, I've got to. You've got to. It has to be, first of all, a personal choice and a personal decision. The law is changing, and I can't quote all of it. The law is changing when it comes to transmission of HIV by telling a partner. You know, there's always a discussion, should I tell a partner? I mean, I have done over the years because it's me, because it's personally for me. And I've heard people walk away, and I've had people say, and is it to say, let's get on with the relationship. So it can be hit and miss. But I suppose, I think really in a nutshell, that is a really quite difficult question. You know, how do you tell people? Well, you can tell people in different ways. If you want to, I've told people via email before, and it's been quite funny, and it has worked. But never, you know, I wouldn't advise someone to tell someone just because they think they have to, and society is telling them they're on effective treatment, they can't pass the virus on. To have a proven case of transmission, that would have to be proven that that person actually passed on the virus. Because at the end of the day, not going to, we could have a whole afternoon about this actually piece of information. At the end of the day, that person could already have acquired the HIV virus from another partner. Yeah. So there's something else, isn't it? So yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm just wondering, I mean, there's going to be some folks on today that maybe aren't familiar with the the term undetectable. What
Yes.
does that help us understand what that means?
Okay, so basically, okay, let's talk about me. So before I was diagnosed with HIV, my blood counts were in the millions. In other words, the virus was incredibly infectious. So it was literally going mad. Now, obviously, if I hadn't got onto treatment the time that I did, I may have ended up like my partner, and that's the truth. But I got the medication into my immune system very quickly. So basically, within a couple of weeks, the medication got a hold of the virus, it suppressed it, got a hold of it, and it literally made it undetectable. So it won't be, okay, you can literally probably see under a microscope, Matt, but it's literally, that's why I've got to take the medication on a 24-hour clock to keep that suppressed. So that's undetectable. So basically, I won't be able to pass on the virus I live with to a sexual partner, because the virus, it's so suppressed by this amazing medication. It's been proven, look what Richard said, 2 million cases of unprotected sex, not one transmission. So it's been medically proven that can happen. So undetectable means untransmittable. I can't pass it on.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to get some thoughts as well. I mean, I was doing a bit of sort of research before this and did a quick sort of Google News search around the word HIV. And what I was really surprised to see was actually the range of different news that in the last couple of days has been put out about HIV. So the first thing that I read said, HIV-free world is finally within reach. But to get there, we need to make sure that everyone's got equal access to, groundbreaking new preventative drugs and treatments. And then as I look at my next tab, I then get a headline, which is a HIV catastrophe coming to Europe? And there's been a surge in sort of COVID hit HIV detection in Europe. So basically the number of infections in the last few years, data is basically telling us that there's more than we know. So we've got these two sort of polar opposite, we're on the way to really eradicating. And on the other side, we've got this quite negative picture. I just wondered what you might think about that. I
mean, with going in too deep of that, obviously, a lot of things increased when we're in COVID. STIs increased because we were still having sex, but we weren't getting tested. Probably we weren't going out into the community. So obviously, a lot of things rose, didn't they? And no doubt some with HIV. I mean, we were still trying to work with communities within the pandemic of COVID, and we're trying to, and this is where the big thing of the test kits, we that literally went through the roof, didn't it, Abby, where we were sending out, we did a big campaign of, even if you're at home, we can send you a test kit and what have you. So I've got the last part of the question there, Matt, sorry. So no
worries. So it's basically, we've got this one picture where it's, we're going to eradicate this by 2030, which is what the UK is aiming. And then we have the other picture, which is basically saying because of the impact of COVID and lack of access to HIV-related services, including testing, etc., the number of undiagnosed cases has gone up, essentially, which could threaten the progress.
Okay, let's turn this around to a positive then. Okay, one of the things that we've implemented a year ago with the vision of ending HIV transmission by 2030 is opt-out testing. So opt-out testing has been rolled out, not all, I mean, this is our vision, isn't it, Abby, to get it in all A&E. So basically we've got them in Brighton, London, Manchester, quote me if there's a couple of cities. So basically in the first 100 days, now again, this is proven statistics, in the first 100 days of implementing opt-out testing in emergency A&E, we have found 128 people living with HIV. So do you remember that figure we opened up with? There's over 5,000 people that are known to be living with HIV but have not come in to test. So there's 128 already, if you want to look at statistics, okay? So you're always going to get something, saying, oh, there's no such thing as the HIV, there's no such thing as COVID. You really got to try and get a balance what we read. And my advice is to look at the documented evidence that is coming out. That is documented evidence, Matt. 128 people. Maybe would never have even imagined to go for a HIV test from perhaps a heterosexual community. And let's look at it. The highest transmissions at the moment are not in the gay and bisexual community, they're in the heterosexual community. So we wish we had the money. We wish we had the money to roll this out in every single city in the UK, Matt. So this is why, obviously, one of the reasons why we're here today.
Yeah. So, you know, we've got to make HIV testing routine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting as well, because I certainly know from being part of the LGBT community myself, you know, this is a community that is more likely to test for transmitted diseases.
Exactly.
And actually what you're saying to us today is, you know, this is not the community that is the most impacted at the moment. It's actually other communities which have a lesser propensity to test as routine. Exactly. And I think that's a really important message today.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, look, we're coming to the end of this session now. So just before we pass back over to Abby for a few sort of perhaps closing remarks, is there anything, any sort of final messages you'd like to land and everyone's take away today?
Oh, absolutely. No.
Right.
Because I know we'll all get putting our Christmas trees up if we celebrate Christmas or what have you. And so we've got all the baubles up and we've got everything, and we're looking at our stocking fillers and we're looking at, oh, what should we get him or her for Christmas? I tell you what, you know what, I think you know what I'm going to say. Get yourself a HIV test kit, pop it in someone's stocking. Look, what I say to people, but yeah, no, I don't need to take a test. Take a HIV test. And then you can share that experience with someone else that may be a bit frightened. Oh, I don't, look, I've taken the test, took me a couple of seconds. Finger prick test, send it away, I'm okay. So take a HIV test, treat yourself, you know, and that's will definitely be my closing message, because testing. We need to know, we say this to our young people in schools, Matt, know your HIV status, not just at a young age, throughout your adult sexual life, because here's a news flash for the world. We're having sex in our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Yes, we are, because we're working longer. We're paying our taxes longer, and we should be having fun longer, but there could be a consequence of that if we're not looking after ourselves longer. So take a HIV test and tell someone about it. How easy it was, how simple it was.
Yeah, what an amazing and inspiring and uplifting piece of advice. So thank you for sharing that. And Abby, perhaps if we come to you, I guess a final point for today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. And Sue, every time you always get me. It's just such an inspiring. I mean, you can just see how much of the work that we're doing here is important to keep carrying that message forward. So yeah, thank you so much for having us. And I hope that you're sort of feeling empowered as individuals to go away and pass that message on to people. And just as sort of a final word from myself, as the sort of corporate partnership side of things here for THT, if you would like to get involved, please do reach out. All of our details are in the chat there, so please, say hello. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do sort of the cheeky plug for you, but please go away and talk about the Terrence Higgins Trust in your organisation. This is a firm or a charity that is about to launch a brand new partnerships initiative, and there's lots of ways to get involved as well with amazing programs and the work that they do. And then as individuals, you'll see the plug in the chat function there. If you can text LGBT Great to 70085, you'll be able to donate £5. And if you are feeling extra generous and the cost of living crisis isn't impacting you too much, you can make that a monthly reoccurring £5 as well. And for those of you that know me, I talk about the power of the tiny gain constantly. And if we all did that, that would be a really big number, and that would go a long way to helping lots of lives around the world. So yeah, please do if you can. Huge thank you as well, Abby and Sue. Fascinating, Sue, listening to your story. So thank you for sharing that. And on behalf of LGBT Great, thanks everybody for joining as well, and take care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care, everybody. Yeah. Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.